In the heart of Beverly Hills, where luxury cars lined the streets and designer boutiques sparkled with opulence, there stood a high-end jewelry store named Eclat. It was a place where the rich and famous came to splurge on glittering diamonds, rare gemstones, and custom-made pieces that cost more than most people made in a lifetime. The store itself was a masterpiece. Marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers, and glass cases displayed dazzling jewels as if they were treasures from another world. Claire Anderson, a 24-year-old sales associate, had worked at Eclat for 2 years. She prided herself on being one of the top performers in the store. With her perfectly styled hair, tailored outfits, and practiced smile, she knew how to charm wealthy clients. Claire thrived on the thrill of closing big deals and earning hefty commissions. Over time, she developed a knack for spotting potential buyers versus those who were merely browsing. Her radar was sharp, almost instinctive, but it also made her judgmental, a flaw she didn't realize would come back to haunt her. On this particular afternoon, the store was quiet. A few employees milled around, polishing display cases or chatting softly behind the counter. Claire stood near the entrance, scrolling through her phone while occasionally glancing up to check for customers. Outside, the California sun bathed, the sidewalk in golden light casting long shadows across the pavement. Then the door jingled softly as someone entered. An elderly woman stepped inside. She wore a simple beige cardigan over a floral print dress, sensible shoes, and carried a worn leather handbag that looked decades old. Her silver hair was neatly pinned back, and her face bore the gentle lines of age. To Claire, she seemed out of place among the extravagance of Eclat. Without even thinking, Claire dismissed her as someone who couldn't possibly afford anything in the store. "Good afternoon," Claire said flatly, forcing a polite smile but not bothering to hide her disinterest. "Can I help you find something?" The woman nodded kindly. "Hello, dear. I'm just looking around." Her voice was soft, warm, and carried a hint of refinement. But Claire barely noticed. All she saw was the modest clothing and the lack of obvious wealth. In her mind, this woman was no different from the tourists who wandered into the store only to gawk at the prices before leaving empty-handed. Claire sighed inwardly, already annoyed by the interruption. She decided to keep an eye on the woman, without wasting too much effort. As the elderly woman began browsing, Claire resumed scrolling through her phone, pretending to be busy. From the corner of her eye, she watched as the visitor lingered by a case filled with diamond necklaces. Each piece shimmered brilliantly under the spotlight, their value marked by tiny plaques that read figures like $30,000, $50,000, even $100,000. Claire rolled her eyes slightly when the woman paused to examine a particularly stunning necklace, a cascade of diamonds set in white gold. Finally, the woman turned toward Claire. "Excuse me, could you tell me more about this one?" she asked, pointing to the necklace. Claire hesitated for a moment, then reluctantly walked over. Up close, she noticed the woman's hands, delicate yet strong with faint traces of age spots. There was a quiet elegance about her, though Claire refused to acknowledge it. Instead, she plastered on her professional smile, which never quite reached her eyes. "That's our signature celestial cascade necklace," Claire explained in a tone that bordered on condescending. "It features 18-karat white gold and over 5 carats of ethically sourced diamonds. The price is $50,000. The woman tilted her head thoughtfully, studying the piece with genuine interest. "It's beautiful," she murmured. "Do you think I could try it on?" Claire blinked, caught off guard. Surely this woman wasn't serious. Did she have any idea how expensive it was? Claire glanced at the handbag again, its edges scuffed and frayed, and felt certain the answer was no. Still, she couldn't outright refuse, not without risking a complaint to management. So, with exaggerated patience, she unlocked the case and carefully lifted the necklace out. "Here you go," Claire said, handing it over with a forced smile. "Would you like me to assist you?" The woman nodded, turning slightly so Claire could fasten the clasp. As the diamonds caught the light, they transformed her appearance entirely. The elegance she exuded became undeniable, almost regal. For a brief second, Claire felt a flicker of admiration, but it vanished as quickly as it came. After all, what did it matter if the woman looked good in the necklace? She probably couldn't afford it anyway. Claire leaned against the counter, crossing her arms as she waited for the woman to admire herself in the mirror. Outwardly, she appeared calm, but inside, her thoughts churned with irritation. Why waste her time on someone like this? She should be focusing on real customers, the kind who could drop 6 figures without blinking. You know, Claire muttered under her breath, just loud enough for the woman to hear. Some of these pieces are investments. They're meant for collectors, people who truly understand their value. The comment hung in the air, dripping with thinly veiled disdain. Claire expected the woman to bristle or walk away embarrassed. But instead, she simply smiled. A serene, knowing smile that somehow unnerved Claire. It was as if the woman saw right through her, understanding exactly what Claire thought of her. And yet she said nothing, choosing instead to remove the necklace and hand it back gracefully. Claire placed the necklace back in its case, feeling both relieved and oddly unsettled. She didn't know why, but there was something about this woman that lingered in her mind long after she returned to her phone. Little did Claire realize this seemingly ordinary encounter was about to spiral into something far greater and far more humbling than she could ever imagine. After handing the necklace back to Claire, the elderly woman continued browsing, her movements calm and unhurried. She wandered over to another display case, this one filled with rings adorned with sapphires, emeralds, and rubies. Claire followed, at a distance, pretending to tidy up nearby shelves while keeping a watchful eye on the visitor. Her irritation simmered beneath the surface, but she reminded herself that it was part of her job to at least appear attentive, even if she doubted the woman would buy anything. As the woman studied the rings, her expression softened with admiration. She pointed to a particular piece, a vintage-style ruby ring surrounded by smaller diamonds, and asked Claire for details. Once again, Claire hesitated before approaching. This time, however, she couldn't help but notice something unusual about the way the woman spoke. There was a quiet confidence in her voice, an air of sophistication that didn't quite match her modest appearance. It puzzled Claire, but she quickly dismissed it as irrelevant. After all, outward appearances were what mattered most in a place, like a claw. "This is our crimson crown ring," Claire explained, trying to sound enthusiastic despite her growing impatience. "It features a 4-carat Burmese ruby set in platinum, surrounded by pave diamonds. The price is $35,000. The woman nodded thoughtfully, tilting her head as though imagining how the ring might look on her finger. Then, almost casually, she said, "My son loves rubies. He's always been drawn to their deep red color. I think he'd appreciate this piece." Claire raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. She had heard similar comments from countless customers who dreamed of buying extravagant gifts they couldn't afford. To her, the woman's words sounded hollow, like wishful thinking rather than genuine intent. Still, she forced herself to reply politely. "That's lovely," Claire said, her tone dripping with insincerity. "Your son must have excellent taste." The woman smiled faintly, either ignoring or not noticing Claire's dismissive attitude. She glanced at the ring one last time before stepping away, leaving Claire to wonder if she would ask to see anything else. But instead of continuing her exploration of the store, the woman paused near the entrance, gazing out the window as though lost in thought. Claire seized the opportunity to retreat behind the counter, where she muttered under her breath to one of her co-workers. "Can you believe her? She's probably just here to waste our time. No way she can afford any of this stuff." Her co-worker, a young man named Ethan, gave her a wary look. "Be careful, Claire. You never know who someone really is." Claire scoffed. "Please, look at her clothes. That bag looks like it's from the 80s. If she's rich, I'll eat my hat." Ethan shrugged, unwilling to argue further. He knew better than to get involved in Claire's judgments, especially when she was in such a sour mood. Meanwhile, the elderly woman remained near the door, seemingly oblivious to the whispered conversation taking place behind her back. A few minutes later, the bell above the entrance jingled again, signaling the arrival of new customers. Claire looked up, expecting to see another tourist or passerby, Instead, she froze in shock as none other than Keanu Reeves walked into the store, accompanied by a well-dressed Hollywood producer. Both men exuded charisma, drawing immediate attention from everyone inside. Employees straightened their postures, eager to assist the famous actor and his companion. Keanu's eyes scanned the room until they landed on the elderly woman standing by the window. A wide grin spread across his face as he strode toward her, his presence commanding yet warm. "Mom!" he called out, his voice filled with affection. Claire's jaw dropped. She stared at the scene unfolding before her, unable to process what was happening. The woman, the same woman she had mocked and dismissed only moments ago, was Keanu Reeves's mother. Patricia Taylor, known for her quiet grace and support of her son's career, now stood smiling as Keanu embraced her warmly. "Surprise," Patricia said softly, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "I wasn't sure you'd make it today." "I wouldn't miss it," Keanu replied, his smile widening. Turning to the producer beside him, he added, "This is my mom. Mom, this is Greg. He's helping me with a project." Greg shook Patricia's hand, clearly charmed by her demeanor. "It's an honor to meet you, Mrs. Taylor. Your son's talent speaks for itself, but his kindness truly sets him apart." Patricia chuckled lightly. "Thank you, Greg. That means a lot coming from you." Throughout the exchange, Claire stood rooted to the spot, her mind racing. How could she have been so wrong? The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. Every snide comment, every dismissive glance, every ounce of disrespect she had shown Patricia now felt like a glaring mistake. Worse still, Keanu's sharp gaze eventually landed on her, and she saw the flicker of disappointment in his eyes. Forcing herself to move, Claire approached the group, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. "Mr. Reeves, Mrs. Taylor," she stammered, struggling to find the right words. I'm so sorry if there was any misunderstanding earlier. Please let me know if there's anything I can do to assist you." Patricia regarded her calmly, her expression unreadable. "Oh, don't worry about it, dear. We're fine for now." Keanu nodded politely, though his silence spoke volumes. Claire wanted to disappear, but there was no escape. As Patricia resumed chatting with her son and Greg, Claire retreated to the counter, her hands trembling as she tried to compose herself. Around her, whispers erupted among the staff. Everyone recognized the magnitude of Claire's blunder, and some even exchanged sympathetic glances, but sympathy wouldn't undo the damage. Claire knew she had crossed a line, and now she would have to face the consequences, not just professionally but personally as well. Little did she realize, however, that this moment was only the beginning. What happened next would ripple far, beyond the confines of the jewelry store, teaching her lessons about judgment, humility, and the importance of treating others with respect, regardless of how they appeared on the surface. The weight of the situation crashed down on Claire like a tidal wave. Standing behind the counter, her face flushed with shame, she tried to focus on anything but the group gathered near the entrance. Keanu Reeves and his mother, Patricia, were deep in conversation with Greg, the producer, their laughter mingling softly as they admired a display of diamond earrings. To anyone else, it might have seemed like an ordinary scene, celebrities shopping for luxury items. But for Claire, every second felt excruciating. Her mind raced, replaying every careless comment she had made earlier. She cringed at the memory of rolling her eyes when Patricia asked about the necklace. She winced at the condescending tone she had used while explaining the price of the ruby ring. Worst of all, she remembered muttering under her breath about how the woman couldn't possibly afford anything in the store. Now those words echoed back to her, sharp and unforgiving. Claire glanced around nervously, hoping none of her co-workers would say anything. But it was too late. The damage was done. Ethan, who had warned her earlier, shot her a sympathetic yet pointed look that said everything without uttering a word. Other employees whispered amongst themselves, casting furtive glances in Claire's direction. She could feel their judgment pressing down on her, even though they hadn't been the ones to insult Patricia Taylor. Meanwhile, Patricia herself seemed blissfully unaware, or perhaps she was choosing not to acknowledge Claire's earlier rudeness. Either way, her composure remained impeccable. As Keanu browsed the jewelry cases, pointing out pieces he thought his mother might like, Patricia nodded along, her smile warm and genuine. There was no hint of anger or vindictiveness in her demeanor, which only made Claire feel worse. How could someone so kind exist in such stark contrast to her own behavior? Keanu eventually turned his attention to the staff, seeking assistance with a few specific items. One of the senior sales associates stepped forward eagerly, offering to help him and Greg. Claire watched from afar, feeling increasingly small and insignificant. She knew she should offer her services too. It was her job after all. But the thought of approaching Keanu and Patricia filled her with dread. What if Patricia decided to call her out? What if Keanu demanded an explanation? For her earlier attitude, the possibilities swirled in her mind, each one more terrifying than the last. As the minutes ticked by, Claire noticed something unsettling. Keanu kept glancing at her. His gaze wasn't accusatory or angry. It was thoughtful, almost curious, but it still sent shivers down her spine. Every time their eyes met, she quickly looked away, unable to hold his stare. It was as if he could see straight through her, reading her guilt like an open book. Finally, the moment came that Claire had been dreading. Patricia walked over to the counter where Claire stood, accompanied by Keanu and Greg. Claire's heart pounded as she forced herself to meet Patricia's calm, steady gaze. "Excuse me," Patricia said gently, placing a hand on the edge of the counter. "Could you tell us about this bracelet?" Claire swallowed hard, her throat dry. She followed Patricia's gesture to a platinum bracelet encrusted with sapphires and diamonds. Her training kicked in automatically, overriding her panic. "Of course," she managed, her voice trembling slightly. "This is our Aurora Borealis bracelet. It features natural blue sapphires surrounded by pavé diamonds. The design is inspired by the Northern Lights." Patricia nodded appreciatively. "It's stunning, isn't it, Keanu?" Keanu smiled, leaning closer to examine the piece. "Definitely. Mom loves sapphires. They remind her of Alaska." Claire blinked, surprised by the personal detail. For a brief moment, she forgot her anxiety and found herself intrigued. Alaska? She hadn't expected such a connection between this elegant woman and the rugged wilderness of the last frontier. But the reprieve was short-lived. As Claire continued describing the bracelet, she became acutely aware of Keanu's presence beside her. He listened intently, nodding occasionally, but there was a subtle tension in his posture, a quiet disapproval that made her stomach churn. When she finished speaking, Keanu thanked her politely, his tone neutral but firm. "Thanks for your help," he said, turning back to his mother. "Let's take a closer look at this one, Mom." Claire nodded stiffly, stepping aside to give them space. She wanted to melt into the floor, to disappear entirely. Instead, she retreated to the far corner of the store, where she pretended to organize inventory while keeping an eye on the trio. Watching Keanu interact with his mother, she couldn't help but notice the bond they shared. Their affection for each other was evident in every glance, every touch, every shared laugh. It was clear that Keanu adored his mother deeply, and Claire realized with growing horror that she had insulted someone who meant the world to him. Time dragged on endlessly as the group browsed the store. Eventually, Patricia decided against making a purchase, citing discomfort with the overall experience. Though she didn't explicitly mention Claire's behavior, the implication hung heavy in the air. Keanu placed a reassuring hand on his mother's shoulder, murmuring something softly before guiding her toward the exit. Greg lingered briefly to thank the staff, then followed them out. The moment the door closed behind them, the store erupted in hushed chatter. Employees exchanged wide-eyed looks, speculating about what had just transpired. Some expressed sympathy for Claire, while others openly criticized her actions. The manager appeared moments later, his expression stern as he motioned for Claire to join him in the office. Inside, the manager wasted no time getting to the point. "Do you understand what just happened?" he asked, his voice low but firm. "That woman is Keanu Reeves' mother. You treated her poorly, and now we're dealing with the fallout." Claire nodded miserably, tears welling up in her eyes. I know I messed up. I didn't mean to offend her. I just assumed. You assumed wrong, the manager interrupted sharply. Assumptions like that are exactly why people lose trust in places like ours. This isn't just about you, it's about the reputation of this entire store. He went on to explain the potential consequences. Bad press, damaged relationships with high-profile clients, and possibly even lost business. By the time he finished, Claire felt utterly defeated. She apologized profusely, promising to learn from her mistake. But deep down, she knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Later that evening, as Claire sat alone in her apartment, she replayed the day's events over and over in her mind. She couldn't shake the image of Patricia's serene smile or Keanu's piercing gaze. They haunted her, not because they were cruel, but because they were kind. Despite everything, they had shown her grace when she least deserved it. In that quiet moment of reflection, Claire began to understand the gravity of her actions. She realized that her judgments weren't just harmful to others. They also revealed flaws within herself. And as difficult as it was to confront those flaws, she knew it was the first step toward becoming someone better. The next morning, Claire woke up feeling like she had been hit by a truck. Her mind was foggy, her chest heavy with dread as she replayed the events of the previous day over and over again. She tried to convince herself it was just a bad dream, a nightmare she could wake up from. But reality refused to let her off the hook. The memory of Patricia Taylor's calm smile, Keanu Reeves' piercing gaze, and the whispers among her co-workers haunted her every thought. By the time she dragged herself out of bed, news of the incident had already spread beyond the confines of Eclat. Someone, whether it was a co-worker or an observant customer, had posted about the encounter on social media. Within hours, screenshots of the post went viral, sparking heated discussions online. People were quick to criticize Claire's behavior, calling her everything from rude to classist. Memes mocking her circulated widely, with hashtags like Claire assumptions trending across platforms. One particularly brutal tweet read, "When you judge a book by its cover but turns out it's signed by Keanu Reeves." As Claire scrolled through her phone, her stomach churned. Each comment felt like a punch to the gut. Some users defended her, saying everyone makes mistakes, but those voices were drowned out by the overwhelming tide of negativity. Worst of all, strangers began digging into her personal life, sharing photos of her Instagram profile and speculating about her career prospects. What started as a single misstep in a luxury jewelry store had spiraled into a full-blown public shaming. Her manager called her later that afternoon, his tone more somber than usual. "We've got a problem," he said bluntly. "This isn't staying contained. Luxury brands are distancing themselves from us because of this fallout. We can't afford to keep you on staff right now." Claire's heart sank. She had known this might happen, but hearing it aloud made it feel final. Swallowing her pride, she apologized again, promising to do whatever it took to make things right. But her manager wasn't interested in promises. He needed results. He informed her that she would be placed on temporary leave while the store figured out how to handle the situation. Translation: she was being unofficially fired. Hanging up the phone, Claire buried her face in her hands. For the first time in years, she didn't know what to do. Her job at Eclat had been her identity. It was where she excelled, where she felt important. Without it, she felt lost. The weight of her mistake pressed down on her, suffocating and unrelenting. That evening, as she sat alone in her dimly lit apartment, there was a knock at her door. Startled, she walked over and opened it cautiously. To her surprise, a courier stood outside holding a small envelope addressed to her. Confused, Claire signed for it and closed the door. Inside the envelope was a handwritten letter. It read, "Dear Claire, I hope this note finds her well. I wanted to take a moment to share my thoughts after our interaction yesterday. First, let me say that I hold no ill will toward you. Life is complicated and we all make assumptions based on limited information. I understand that your comments stemmed not from malice but from a place of misunderstanding. That said, I believe moments like these offer opportunities for growth. Judging others based on appearances limits not only them but also ourselves. When we assume someone's worth based on their clothing or accessories, we miss the chance to connect with people who may have far more depth than we realize. I'm not writing this to shame you. Rather, I want to encourage you to reflect on how you treat others moving forward. Kindness costs nothing, yet it has the power to change lives, including your own. Take care. Patricia Taylor Clare stared at the letter, tears streaming down her face. She hadn't expected forgiveness, not so soon, and certainly not from someone she had treated so poorly. Yet here it was, written in Patricia's gentle hand. An act of grace when Claire least deserved it. For hours she sat with the letter, rereading it countless times. Each word resonated deeply, forcing her to confront uncomfortable truths about herself. She realized that her dismissive attitude wasn't just harmful to others, it reflected her own insecurities. Treating customers differently based on their appearance gave her a false sense of control, a way to boost her ego in a world where she often felt inadequate. But instead of making her stronger, it had left her isolated and ashamed. Determined to turn things around, Claire decided to take action. The next day, she drafted a heartfelt apology on social media. In her post, she admitted her mistake, acknowledging the harm she had caused. She expressed gratitude to Patricia for her kindness and vowed to approach her work and her life with greater empathy and humility. "I judged someone unfairly," she wrote. "I assumed they couldn't afford the jewelry I showed them, and I treated them with disrespect because of it. I was wrong, and I am truly sorry. Moving forward, I will strive to see people for who they are, not for what they wear or carry. Thank you to Mrs. Taylor for showing me grace when I didn't deserve it." The response to her apology was mixed. Some people praised her for owning up to her actions, while others remained skeptical, accusing her of seeking attention or trying to save face. Despite the criticism, Claire felt a glimmer of hope. For the first time in days, she had taken control of her narrative. Instead of letting the incident define her, she chose to use it as a catalyst for change. Over the following weeks, Claire threw herself into self-reflection. She read books about mindfulness, empathy, and emotional intelligence. She volunteered at a local shelter, serving meals to people experiencing homelessness. Interacting with individuals from diverse backgrounds reminded her of the humanity she had overlooked during her time at Eclat. Slowly, but surely, she began to rebuild her confidence, not as someone who thrived on judgment, but as someone committed to treating others with dignity and respect. Her efforts didn't go unnoticed. One day, while volunteering, she met a boutique owner who ran a small shop specializing in handmade jewelry. Impressed by Claire's sincerity and willingness to learn, the owner offered her a part-time position. Though the pay was modest compared to what she earned at Eclat, Claire accepted without hesitation. Working in a smaller, less pretentious environment allowed her to focus on building genuine connections with customers, free from the pressure to cater exclusively to the wealthy elite. Though the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, Claire knew she was heading in the right direction. The experience had humbled her in ways she never anticipated, teaching her valuable lessons about compassion, accountability, and the importance of seeing beyond surface-level impressions. And while she couldn't undo the past, she resolved to ensure that her future actions would reflect the person she was striving to become. Months passed, and Claire's life began to take on a new rhythm. Working at the small boutique was a stark contrast to her days at Eclat. The shop, nestled in a quieter part of town, had none of the glitz and glamour of Beverly Hills. Its charm lay in its simplicity, handcrafted pieces displayed on wooden shelves, soft lighting that created a cozy atmosphere, and customers who came not just for jewelry but for connection. It was here that Claire found herself growing in ways she hadn't expected. The boutique owner, a kind woman named Margaret, became both a mentor and a friend. She taught Claire the value of storytelling behind each piece of jewelry. Every necklace, ring, or bracelet had a history, whether it was made by an artisan in Mexico, inspired by ancient traditions, or crafted from recycled materials. Margaret encouraged Claire to share these stories with customers, helping them see the beauty beyond the price tag. For the first time, Claire realized that selling jewelry wasn't just about transactions. It was about creating meaningful experiences. At first, Claire struggled to adjust. Her old habits of sizing people up based on appearances lingered, even though she worked hard to suppress them. There were moments when she caught herself making assumptions. A young couple browsing engagement rings must be looking for something cheap, or an older man examining delicate earrings must be shopping for his wife. But every time she slipped, Margaret gently reminded her to pause and listen. "Let their words guide you," Margaret would say, "not your guesses." Slowly, Claire learned to approach each customer with curiosity rather than judgment. She discovered that the young couple was actually saving up for a modest yet meaningful ring, while the older man was buying earrings as a tribute to his late wife, who had loved bold accessories. These interactions opened her eyes to the rich tapestry of human experience, reminding her that everyone carried a story worth hearing. Despite her progress, the shadow of her past mistakes still loomed over her. Though the viral outrage had died down, Claire occasionally stumbled upon old posts or memes mocking her. Some nights, she'd lie awake replaying those cruel comments in her mind. But instead of letting them drag her back into despair, she used them as fuel to keep improving. Each jab served as a reminder of why she needed to change, not just for others, but for herself. One day, a familiar face walked into the boutique. At first, Claire didn't recognize her. Dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, Patricia Taylor looked like any other visitor browsing the displays. But when their eyes met, Claire froze, her heart skipping a beat. For a moment, panic gripped her. Was Patricia here to confront her? Had she come to demand an explanation? To Claire's surprise, Patricia simply smiled warmly and approached the counter. "Hello, dear," she said softly. "I hope you don't mind me stopping by." Claire blinked, unsure how to respond. "Mrs. Taylor, I'm so glad to see you," she stammered, her voice thick with emotion. "I didn't expect—" Patricia waved a hand dismissively. "Please call me Patricia, and there's no need to worry, I'm not here to cause trouble. I just wanted to check in on you." Her words caught Claire off guard. After everything that had happened, Patricia had taken the time to seek her out, not to scold or shame her, but to offer support. Tears welled up in Claire's eyes as she struggled to find the right words. "Thank you," she managed finally, "for everything. Your letter meant more to me than I can say." Patricia nodded, her expression gentle. "I could tell you were sincere in your apology. That takes courage, especially after such a public incident. I wanted to see how you're doing now." Claire hesitated before answering. She knew she couldn't sugarcoat things. Patricia deserved honesty. "It's been hard," she admitted. "Some days are better than others. I've made mistakes and I'll probably make more. But I'm trying. Really trying." Patricia placed a reassuring hand on Claire's arm. "That's all anyone can ask for, to try. Growth isn't always easy, but it's worth it." They spent the next hour talking, sharing stories and laughter. Patricia admired some of the handmade pieces in the boutique, marveling at the craftsmanship and the stories behind them. Claire found herself relaxing in Patricia's presence, feeling less like a former adversary and more like a friend. By the end of their conversation, Claire felt lighter, as if a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying had been lifted. As Patricia prepared to leave, she turned back to Claire with one last piece of advice. "Remember, dear, we're all works in progress. Don't let fear of failure stop you from moving forward. Keep learning, keep growing, and most importantly, keep being kind." With that, Patricia stepped out of the boutique, leaving Claire standing behind the counter, tears streaming down her face once again, but this time they were tears of gratitude. In the weeks that followed, Claire threw herself into her work with renewed determination. She reached out to local charities offering to host fundraising events at the boutique. She started a blog where she shared stories about the artisans whose work filled the shop, shining a light on their creativity and resilience. And she continued, volunteering at the shelter, finding joy in serving others without expecting anything in return. Word of her efforts began to spread. Customers noticed the warmth and authenticity she brought to every interaction. They left glowing reviews online, praising not just the jewelry but the care and attention they received from Claire. Slowly, her reputation began to shift, from someone defined by a single mistake to someone celebrated for her growth and dedication. Even her relationship with Margaret deepened. The older woman saw Claire's transformation firsthand and took pride in knowing she had played a role in guiding her. "You've come so far," Margaret told her one evening as they closed up the shop. "But remember, true success isn't about perfection. It's about showing up every day and choosing to do better." Claire nodded, absorbing the wisdom. She knew she still had much to learn, but she also knew she was on the right path. The journey ahead wouldn't always be smooth, but she was ready to face it head-on, with humility, empathy, and a commitment to treating others with the respect they deserved. And though she couldn't erase the past, she could shape her future. With each new day, Claire proved to herself, and to the world, that redemption wasn't just possible. It was within reach for anyone willing to embrace it. Years passed, and Claire's life transformed in ways she never imagined. The boutique where she worked became a cornerstone of the community, a place where people gathered not just to buy jewelry but to connect, share stories, and celebrate milestones. Her efforts to uplift local artisans and give back to the community earned her respect and admiration from those around her. What started as a job to rebuild her shattered confidence turned into a passion that filled her days with purpose. Claire often thought about how different her life might have been if she hadn't made that fateful mistake at Eclat. At first, she had seen it as the lowest point of her life, a moment of humiliation she would carry forever. But over time, she came to view it differently. It wasn't just a failure, it was a turning point. That day taught her lessons no amount of success could have: humility, empathy, and the importance of treating everyone with dignity, regardless of appearances. Her growth didn't go unnoticed. One afternoon, as she was arranging a display of turquoise necklaces, a familiar figure walked into the shop. Keanu Reeves stood there, smiling warmly. Claire froze for a second, unsure whether this was real or some elaborate dream. "Hi," he said simply, his voice calm and friendly. "I hope I'm not interrupting." Claire shook herself out of her stupor and greeted him with a nervous smile. "Not at all. Welcome to the boutique. Can I help you find something?" Keanu chuckled softly. "Actually, I'm here because my mom told me about this place. She mentioned how much she enjoyed visiting and how much she appreciated meeting you." Claire felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment and gratitude. "Your mom? She's incredible. I don't know if I'll ever be able to thank her enough for giving me a second chance." "She believes in second chances," Keanu replied, his tone thoughtful. "And so do I. We've all made mistakes. What matters is what we do afterward." They spent the next hour chatting casually like old friends catching up. Keanu admired the handmade pieces in the shop, complimenting the craftsmanship and the stories behind them. He even purchased a bracelet for his sister, saying it reminded him of her adventurous spirit. As they talked, Claire realized how kind and down-to-earth Keanu truly was. Despite his fame, he carried himself with humility and grace, qualities she deeply admired. When Keanu left, he thanked her sincerely, adding, "Keep doing what you're doing, Claire. You're making a difference." Those words stayed with her long after he was gone, reinforcing her belief that every action, no matter how small, mattered. As word spread about Claire's journey, she began receiving invitations to speak at events hosted by local organizations. At first, she hesitated, unsure if she had anything valuable to share. But Margaret encouraged her, reminding her that her story could inspire others. So Claire agreed, stepping onto stages she once thought were reserved for people far more accomplished than herself. At these events, she spoke openly about her past, the assumptions she made, the harm she caused, and the steps she took to make amends. She emphasized the importance of treating everyone equally, urging listeners to look beyond surface-level impressions and see the humanity in others. Her talks resonated deeply, earning standing ovations and heartfelt messages from attendees, who felt moved by her honesty. One evening, after delivering a speech at a women's empowerment conference, a young woman approached Claire with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "Your story gives me hope. I messed up recently and I thought I'd never recover. But hearing you talk reminds me that it's possible to grow and change." Claire hugged her tightly, feeling a surge of emotion. In that moment, she understood the ripple effect of her actions. By choosing to rise above her mistakes, she had inspired others to do the same. It was a responsibility she embraced wholeheartedly. Back at the boutique, Claire continued building connections with customers and artisans alike. She collaborated with local schools to teach students about entrepreneurship and creativity, showing them how art and business could intersect meaningfully. She partnered with shelters and nonprofits to provide workshops for underprivileged individuals, helping them develop skills they could use to build brighter futures. Through it all, she remained grounded, remembering the lessons she had learned along the way. When challenges arose, and they inevitably did, she faced them with resilience, knowing she had already overcome far worse. Her colleagues admired her strength, often turning to her for guidance and support. Margaret eventually retired, leaving the boutique in Claire's capable hands. Under her leadership, the shop flourished, expanding its reach while staying true to its core values. Customers traveled from neighboring cities to experience the warmth and authenticity Claire brought to every interaction. The boutique became known not just for its beautiful jewelry, but for the sense of community it fostered. On her 32nd birthday, Claire stood outside the boutique, gazing at the sign that now bore her name, Claire's Treasures. She smiled, reflecting on how far she had come. From the arrogant sales associate at Eclat to the compassionate owner of a thriving business, her journey had been one of transformation, not just professionally, but personally. Inside the shop, friends, family, and loyal customers gathered to celebrate. Patricia sent a bouquet of flowers with a note that read, "To Claire, whose kindness shines brighter than any gemstone. Keep shining, dear." Reading it, Claire felt a lump rise in her throat. She realized that forgiveness wasn't just something you received from others, it was something you gave yourself. As the evening unfolded, laughter and music filled the air. Claire mingled with guests, sharing stories and memories. For the first time in years, she felt completely at peace, with her past, her present, and her future. Looking back, Claire knew she wouldn't change a thing about her journey. Every misstep, every challenge, and every lesson had shaped her into the person she was today. She had learned that redemption wasn't about erasing mistakes, it was about growing from them. And though the road ahead would undoubtedly bring new obstacles, she faced it with courage, knowing she had the tools to navigate whatever came her way. In the end, Claire's story wasn't just about jewelry or luxury, it was about humanity. About seeing beyond appearances, embracing vulnerability, and finding beauty in imperfection. Most importantly, it was a testament to the power of second chances and the enduring impact of kindness.